I've searched 20 years for you.
Who are you?
The hungry boy you saved? Today I'm finally home.
"20 years ago, on a cold, rainy night, one simple act of kindness changed 2 lives forever. But the woman who gave that kindness never knew what happened next. She never knew the scared young man she helped would disappear without a trace. Or that one day he would become one of the richest men in America. And now, after searching for her for 20 long years, he was finally standing in front of her. The quiet neighborhood fell silent as a line of black luxury SUVs rolled slowly down the street. Neighbors stepped onto their porches, children stopped playing basketball, and curtains moved as people peeked through their windows. Everyone wondered why a billionaire, surrounded by security guards in dark suits, had come to this forgotten block where nothing exciting ever happened. Cameras from local reporters were already gathering at the corner because word had spread that someone important was coming, but nobody expected what happened next. The billionaire ignored every camera, every microphone, and every person trying to get his attention. Instead, he walked straight toward a small brick house with faded white paint and a tiny front porch where an older black woman sat quietly in a rocking chair, holding a cup of tea. Her name was Mary Johnson. She had spent most of her life working hard, raising her family and helping people whenever she could, even when she barely had enough for herself. She looked up as the expensive cars stopped outside her home, completely confused. She had never met a billionaire. She had never been famous. She couldn't imagine why someone like him would even know her name. The tall man removed his sunglasses, took a slow breath, and walked closer. His eyes were already filled with emotion. For a few seconds, he couldn't even speak. Then, in a quiet voice that everyone around could hear, he finally said, "I've been looking for you for 20 years. Mary stared at him, searching his face, but there was nothing familiar about him. She gently shook her head and whispered, "I'm sorry." "Have we met before?" The billionaire smiled through tears and replied, "Number, you've never seen my face, but 20 years ago you saved my life without even asking who I was." Mary froze. She searched her memory, trying to remember a stranger from so many years ago, while every neighbor stood speechless. Who was this man? Why had he spent 2 decades searching for an ordinary black mother? And what happened 20 years earlier that made one of the wealthiest men in the country stand before her with tears in his eyes? The answer would leave the entire neighborhood and millions of people watching completely speechless. Mary Johnson wasn't a celebrity, a politician, or someone whose picture had ever appeared in a newspaper. She was simply a hardworking black mother who believed that doing the right thing mattered more than being noticed. At 62 years old, her hands showed the signs of a lifetime of honest work. Every wrinkle on her face carried a story of sacrifice, long nights, and quiet prayers. She had raised her only son by herself after losing her husband to a sudden heart attack when their boy was just 6 years old. There were days when she didn't know how she would pay the rent or keep food on the table, but somehow she always found a way. She worked wherever she could, cleaning offices before sunrise, helping at a neighborhood diner during lunch, and spending weekends caring for elderly people who had no family nearby. It was exhausting, but Mary never complained. She believed that hard work built character, and she wanted her son to grow up seeing that no honest job was ever too small. Even when money was tight, she kept one habit that everyone in the neighborhood admired. If she saw someone hungry, she shared her meal. If a child needed a winter coat, she quietly found one. If an elderly neighbor couldn't buy groceries, Mary somehow made an extra shopping trip without expecting a single dollar in return. She never posted about her kindness, never looked for praise, and never told people what she had done. To her, helping others wasn't something special. It was simply the way she believed people should treat each other. Over the years, the neighborhood changed. Families moved away, old buildings were replaced, and many of the people who once knew Mary disappeared. Yet she remained in the same modest brick house, tending to the small flower garden her late husband had planted decades earlier. Every morning she watered those flowers with the same care she had once given her family, believing that if you looked after the little things in life, they would remind you to stay grateful. She had no idea that someone, hundreds of miles away, thought about her almost every single day. To Mary, the young stranger she had once helped had become nothing more than a faded memory buried beneath 20 years of everyday life. She never wondered what became of him because she had never helped him expecting anything in return. As far as she was concerned, she had simply done what any decent person should do. But what Mary didn't know was that, For one frightened teenager, her kindness wasn't just a warm meal or a safe place to rest. It was the moment that gave him hope when he had completely lost faith in the world. And now, after 20 years, that forgotten moment was about to return to her doorstep in a way she could never have imagined. 20 years earlier, Mary Johnson was finishing a long shift at the neighborhood diner. It was already dark, and a cold rain had started falling across the city. Her feet hurt, her back ached, and all she wanted was to get home, check on her young son, and rest before another early morning at work. As she walked past the old bus station, she noticed a teenage boy sitting alone on a wooden bench in the far corner. At first, she thought he was simply waiting for a late bus, but something didn't feel right. His clothes were soaked from the rain, one sleeve of his hoodie was torn, and there was a small cut above his eyebrow that had dried with streaks of blood across his face. He looked around every few seconds, as if he was afraid someone was following him. Most people walked past without giving him a second look. A few even crossed the street assuming he was trouble, but Mary saw something different. She didn't see a dangerous teenager. She saw a frightened child trying his best to look strong. Instead of walking away, she slowly approached him and gently asked, "Honey, have you eaten today?" The boy looked up with tired eyes but didn't answer. His silence told her everything she needed to know. Without asking another question, Mary took him to the small diner where she worked. She knew the manager would be upset because the kitchen had already closed, but she didn't care. She made the boy a hot plate of fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and warm biscuits. At first he hesitated, almost like he wasn't sure the food was really for him. Then hunger took over, and he ate every bite as tears quietly rolled down his face. Mary pretended not to notice because she didn't want to embarrass him. After the meal, she opened the small first aid kit behind the counter and carefully cleaned the cut on his forehead. She handed him one of her late husband's old jackets that she kept in the car during winter and said, "You'll stay warmer in this than those wet clothes." The teenager finally spoke, his voice shaking. He admitted he had run away from an abusive foster home and was trying to reach another city where a distant relative might help him start over. He was scared to give his real name because he believed the people looking for him would drag him back. Mary didn't push for answers. She reached into her purse, counted the few dollars she had left after paying her own bills, and bought him a bus ticket for the first morning route. Before the bus pulled away, the young man looked through the window with tears in his eyes and quietly said, "Ma'am, I don't know if I'll ever see you again, but I promise you this. If I ever make something of my life, I'll come back and thank you." Mary smiled, waved goodbye, and watched the bus disappear into the rain. Never imagining that the frightened teenager she had helped that night would one day become one of the wealthiest men in the country, and that he would spend the next 20 years trying to find the woman who had given him hope when the world had given him nothing. When the bus finally pulled into Chicago the next morning, the frightened teenager stepped off carrying nothing but a small backpack, Mary's late husband's old jacket, and a hope he hadn't felt in years. He still didn't know what his future would look like, but one thing had changed forever. For the first time, he believed that not everyone in the world wanted to hurt him. The kindness Mary had shown him became the reason he refused to give up. Over the next few years, he worked harder than anyone around him. During the day, he stocked shelves at a grocery store, cleaned office buildings after closing time, and washed dishes in a small restaurant. At night, he studied at the public library until it closed. There were evenings when he was so tired that he fell asleep with a textbook still open on the table. But every time he thought about quitting, he remembered the woman who had spent her last few dollars on a stranger she didn't even know. He promised himself that her sacrifice would never be wasted. As the years passed, his determination opened new doors. He earned a scholarship to study business and computer engineering at a local college. His professors quickly noticed that he wasn't the smartest student in the classroom, but he was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. While many of his classmates were focused on getting high-paying jobs after graduation, he dreamed of building something that could change lives. After college, he started a small technology company from a rented garage with 2 old computers and one friend who believed in his vision. The first year was filled with failures. Investors rejected him. Banks refused to give him loans. Some people laughed at his ideas and told him to find a real job. There were months when he couldn't even afford his own salary, yet he refused to quit. He kept hearing Mary's gentle voice in his mind saying, "As long as you keep moving forward, tomorrow can always be better than today." Slowly, everything began to change. One product became successful, then another. His company grew from 3 employees to 30, then 300, and eventually thousands across the country. Within 15 years, he had built one of the fastest-growing technology companies in America. Business magazines called him a visionary. Television networks wanted exclusive interviews. His name appeared on lists of the nation's youngest self-made billionaires. But despite the private jets, luxury homes, and boardroom success, there was one thing money could never buy. He still didn't know the name of the woman who had saved him on that rainy night. Every major achievement reminded him that none of it would have been possible without one black mother who chose compassion instead of judgment. While the world celebrated the billionaire he had become, he quietly carried an old, worn bus ticket in his wallet and Mary's faded jacket in a glass case at his office. To everyone else, they looked like ordinary memories. To him, they were proof that one act of kindness had given him a second chance at life, and he was determined to find the woman responsible, no matter how long it took. As the years passed, his business became larger than he had ever imagined, but one promise remained unfinished. Every birthday, every company anniversary, and every major success reminded him of the woman who had changed his life with nothing more than kindness. He could remember her warm smile, the sound of her gentle voice, and the old jacket she had placed over his shoulders that cold, rainy night. But there was one painful problem. He had never learned her full name. All he knew was that she worked at a small neighborhood diner near an old bus station. Determined to keep his promise, he hired private investigators to search for her. They tracked old business records, visited the bus station, and spoke with people who had lived in the area years before. But the diner had closed, the neighborhood had changed, and many records had disappeared. Every search ended the same way. No one knew where Mary Johnson had gone. His closest friends told him to let it go. His business partners said he was wasting time and money chasing a memory from the past, but he refused to give up. "Some debts can't be paid with money," he often said. "The greatest one I owe is to the woman who gave me hope." Quietly, without telling the public why, he created scholarships for struggling students, donated millions to shelters for homeless teenagers, and supported programs for single mothers. Every one of those gifts was inspired by Mary, because he believed the best way to honor her while searching was to pass her kindness on to someone else. Then, nearly 20 years after that rainy night, everything changed. One investigator called his office with unexpected news. While searching through old property records and voter registrations, he found a woman named Mary Johnson living in a quiet neighborhood several states away. The billionaire didn't wait for another report or another meeting. He canceled his entire schedule, boarded his private jet that same afternoon, and headed straight to the address. After 20 long years, the promise he had carried in his heart was finally about to be fulfilled. The quiet street seemed to stop breathing as the billionaire slowly walked toward Mary's front porch. His security team stayed back, giving him the moment he had waited 20 years to experience. Mary looked at him with kind but confused eyes. She could see the emotion on his face, yet she couldn't understand why a man she had never met was standing in front of her fighting back tears. He smiled softly and said, "Ma'am, I don't expect you to remember me. 20 years is a long time." Mary shook her head politely. "I'm sorry, son, I wish I knew who you were." He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and carefully pulled out something old and worn. It was a faded bus ticket, protected inside a clear plastic sleeve. Then he opened a small box held by one of his assistants. Inside was an old brown jacket, carefully cleaned and preserved. The moment Mary saw that jacket, her eyes grew wide. Her hands slowly covered her mouth as memories rushed back. The rainy night, the scared teenage boy, the hot meal, the bus station. Before she could say a word, the billionaire whispered, "You gave me that jacket. You paid for this bus ticket with money you couldn't afford to spend. You told me that no matter how hard life became, I should never stop believing that good people still existed." Tears rolled down Mary's face. "Oh my lord, you're that young boy," she whispered. He nodded, unable to hold back his own tears any longer. Without thinking, Mary stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him just as she had comforted him years before. The billionaire hugged her tightly, holding on as though he never wanted to let go again. Neighbors watching from their porches wiped tears from their eyes as the emotional reunion unfolded. After a long moment, he looked at Mary and quietly said, "Everything I have today started with you. That night you didn't just feed a hungry teenager. You gave him a reason to believe his life was worth fighting for. I've dreamed about thanking you every single day since then." Mary gently smiled through her tears and replied, "Son, I only did what any mother would have done for a child in need." Those simple words reminded everyone listening that true kindness never asks for recognition. It simply changes lives, often without ever knowing it. After the tears settled and the two of them sat together on the porch, the billionaire took a deep breath and smiled. "Mary," he said, "I didn't come here just to say thank you." He nodded toward one of his assistants, who walked forward carrying a large envelope and a small set of keys tied with a blue ribbon. Mary looked confused. She had never cared about money, and she certainly wasn't expecting gifts. The billionaire gently placed the envelope in her hands and said, "For 20 years, I've imagined this moment. I wanted to repay your kindness, but I also wanted to do it in a way that honored the person you are." With shaking hands, Mary opened the envelope. Inside were the legal papers showing that her home was now completely paid off. There would never be another mortgage payment or property debt. She looked up in disbelief, but before she could speak, he smiled again and handed her the keys. "Those aren't for this house," he said. "They're for a brand new SUV parked down the street. I remember you walking everywhere because you couldn't always afford a reliable car. I wanted to make sure that never happens again." Mary was speechless. Tears filled her eyes once more, but the surprises weren't over. The billionaire explained that he had also created an education trust for her grandchildren, making sure every one of them could attend college without worrying about tuition or student loans. He had even arranged for her home to be fully renovated, while keeping every detail she loved, including the small flower garden planted by her late husband years ago. Mary slowly shook her head and whispered, "Son, this is far more than I ever dreamed of." The billionaire smiled warmly and replied, "No, ma'am, it's still not enough. You gave me something no amount of money could ever buy. You gave me hope when I had none. Everything I own today began with the kindness you showed a scared teenager on one rainy night." The neighbors watching nearby began to applaud, not because they were impressed by the money, but because they had just witnessed something far more valuable, a promise kept after 20 years, and a reminder that genuine kindness always leaves a mark that time can never erase. As grateful as Mary was, she couldn't stop thinking about other families who were struggling just as she once had. She looked at the billionaire with tears still in her eyes and gently said, "Son, you've already given me more than I could ever ask for. But if you really want to thank me, promise me one thing: don't stop with me. There are mothers out there working 2 jobs, children going to bed hungry, and young people who just need someone to believe in them. Help them the way you say I helped you." Her words filled the quiet street with silence. The billionaire lowered his head for a moment, deeply moved. Even after everything she had received, Mary wasn't thinking about herself. She was thinking about complete strangers. In that moment, he realized that her greatest gift had never been the meal, the bus ticket, or the jacket. It was the way she always put other people first. He smiled and said, "Mary, that's exactly why I spent 20 years looking for you. Your heart hasn't changed." A few weeks later, he announced the launch of the Mary Johnson Hope Foundation, a charity built in honor of the woman who had changed his life with one simple act of kindness. The foundation provided emergency support for single mothers, college scholarships for young people from low-income families, safe housing for teenagers leaving foster care, and job training for parents trying to rebuild their lives. But the most special part of the foundation wasn't the money, it was Mary herself. She agreed to serve as its honorary chair, spending time with families, listening to their stories, and reminding them that difficult seasons don't last forever. People traveled from across the country just to meet the woman whose compassion had inspired a movement. Reporters asked the billionaire why he named the foundation after someone who had never sought fame or recognition. He smiled and answered, "Because the greatest heroes aren't always the ones the world knows. Sometimes they're the mothers who quietly change one life, never realizing that one life can go on to change thousands more." From that day forward, Mary's kindness reached farther than either of them had ever imagined, proving that one caring heart can create a legacy that touches generations. A few months later, the grand opening of the Mary Johnson Hope Foundation brought together people from all walks of life: community leaders, teachers, business owners, single parents, college students, and families who had already received help filled the large community center. News cameras lined the back of the room, but the attention wasn't on the billionaire. It was on Mary. Dressed in a simple navy blue dress, she looked both proud and humbled as she walked into the building. She wasn't used to standing in front of crowds or hearing people applaud for her. All her life, she had quietly helped others without expecting anyone to notice. As she stepped onto the stage, every person in the room rose to their feet. The standing ovation lasted nearly a full minute. Mary covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed by the love and respect surrounding her. When the applause finally settled, the billionaire walked to the podium and looked across the audience before turning toward Mary. His voice was steady but filled with emotion. "People often ask me what the secret to success is," he began. "They expect me to talk about business, investments, or hard work. Those things matter, but they aren't the reason I'm standing here today. 20 years ago, I was a scared teenager with no family, no money, and no hope. One woman chose to see me as a person instead of a problem. She fed me, encouraged me, and reminded me that kindness still existed. That single act changed the direction of my entire life. The room became completely silent. Every company I've built, every dream I've achieved, and every life we've helped through this foundation started because one black mother refused to walk past a stranger in need. Tears filled Mary's eyes as the audience applauded once again. Many people in the crowd were crying too. In that moment, everyone understood that true greatness isn't measured by the size of a bank account or the title on a business card. It's measured by the lives you lift up along the way. And on that stage, Mary Johnson finally received the recognition she had never asked for, but had always deserved. As the ceremony came to an end and the crowd slowly began to leave, the billionaire and Mary remained standing together outside the community center. The evening sun cast a warm glow across the garden, and for a moment everything was quiet. Mary looked at the man everyone admired and gently squeezed his hand. With a soft smile, she said, "Son, I hope you know something. I never helped you because I thought you'd become rich. I helped you because you looked like a child who needed someone to care." The billionaire lowered his head, his eyes filling with tears once again. "And that's exactly why I'll spend the rest of my life trying to live up to the example you set," he replied. "You didn't just save a frightened teenager that night. You gave him the courage to believe that his future could be different." Mary smiled and said, "Promise me one more thing. Never let success change your heart. The day money becomes more important than people is the day you've truly become poor." He nodded without hesitation. "I promise." Before they said goodbye, he wrapped his arms around her one last time. It wasn't the hug of a billionaire thanking someone for a favor. It was the hug of a son thanking the woman who had given him hope when he had none. In the years that followed, the Mary Johnson Hope Foundation continued changing lives across the country. Thousands of single mothers received support, young people earned scholarships, and struggling families found a second chance because one woman had chosen kindness over fear on a rainy night 20 years earlier. Mary never asked for fame, and she never considered herself a hero. She simply believed that every person deserved compassion, no matter where they came from or what they looked like. And maybe that's the lesson we all need to remember. Your job title, your bank account, and your success may impress people for a while, but they are never the greatest measure of who you are. The way you treat a stranger, the hand you offer to someone who's struggling, and the kindness you show when no one is watching, those are the things that leave a lasting legacy. Because one small act of compassion can change a life, and sometimes, as Mary's story proves, it can change thousands. If this story touched your heart, let it remind you that the greatest gift you can ever give someone isn't money, it's hope.